Now, the Me Too movement actually began more than a decade ago in Harlem in New York, but last October, the hashtag of that same name exploded on Twitter after women began to share their status as Me Too to signify that they too had been sexually harassed or assaulted. Actress, director, and activist Alyssa Milano wrote that tweet heard, quote, round the world just as numerous allegations of sexual misconduct were leveled against high-profile men in the entertainment industry, most notably Harvey Weinstein.
Recently, I visited California where I had the opportunity to speak with Alyssa Milano at her home. She's been a vocal advocate of the Me Too movement, democratic causes, and women's rights in general. She says the movement is strong and accountability is at the heart of efforts by women to have their voices heard. But my spirited conversation with her also covered a broad range of topics, including her thoughts on President Trump, gun control, and her push to stop the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Your activism doesn't stop with the Me Too movement, although that's one of the more prominent places, I think, where you've directed your attention recently. You've also been involved with calls for, I don't want to put words in your mouth, gun control, gun reform, gun bans.
Gun laws.
Stricter gun laws.
Yes.
There was a mass shooting recently. This is an issue that keeps coming up, and it seems like we repeat the same debate over and over in this country, and very little actually ends up changing from a legal perspective. What would you like to see changed?
Well, I do think since Parkland a lot has changed on a state level. It just hasn't changed on a federal level. There were many, many states that put stricter gun laws in place after Parkland, and I think that that's super important to stress. But I think we, really need to strip away the power of the gun lobby and the power that they have in the stronghold that they have on these politicians that seem to prevent policy from changing that would make the country safer.
Do you think it would make the country safer to just ban private ownership of firearms? How far would you like the tighter restrictions to go?
We're a two-gun household in this house, which I think most people are surprised. I think
most people are surprised, I would wager. Yeah.
Many gun owners want stricter gun laws.
Stricter how? I mean, now, to be fair, and this is also, I think, where the conversation often breaks down, as you mentioned, states, I'm from New York, very different gun laws than Virginia, very different gun laws than Alaska.
On a federal level, let's just talk on a federal level.
Yeah.
I think that universal background checks, closing all the gun show loopholes are very, very important. Red flag laws.
Mental health red flag laws or domestic violence as well?
Domestic violence. There's a number of states, California being included, that have very good basis for red flag laws that I think should be federal. 3-day waiting period would be great. I don't think it should be as easy to buy a caramel macchiato at Starbucks or as easy to buy an AR-15 as a caramel macchiato at Starbucks, and sometimes
I think it's a little harder to buy.
No, there's actually a video on the internet that you should look at.
I think I'm familiar with the one you're referring to. Where he goes in, I don't think he actually buys the gun though, if I recall. He just goes through the process of getting ready to buy a gun. But
it's about the same amount of time, and there's actually a new video right now on Now This showing exactly how easy it is without a background check to buy a gun online. And now we're talking about being able to print 3D guns in our houses.
You've been very active in that discussion as well.
I don't know how anyone thinks that's a good idea.
Well, it is and has been legal actually for, I believe, the entirety of the country's existence to make your own firearms.
Yeah.
So you can build your own gun. That's not new. The blueprint for 3D printing guns is out there already. It's easy to Google.
Here's my problem with it, is I live in the state of California because we have such strict gun laws. There is absolutely no way to rein that in. So I don't know, as a mother of 2 children, I don't know how much more I could do, right? I'm living in the state I want to live in, and we have very strict gun laws. This idea of 3D guns then makes those laws totally irrelevant because anyone can do it here. So I think, all of these There's so many issues that are happening right now in our country, where any normal human being that is not driven by partisan politics can see that they're just ridiculous ideas, absurdity. And I think that because we have not called out the absurdity for the last, 2.5 years since our president started campaigning to be president, because the media didn't call out how absolutely absurd this was.
You don't think the media is hostile enough to Trump?
I'm talking about 2.5 years ago when he started to run in his campaign. The fact that the media actually normalized some of what he did and continues to normalize it instead of going, can you believe how crazy this is? This guy wants to do this.
I would wonder if you were to have this conversation with any number of White House correspondents or major news anchors, other than at one channel that I'm sure you could guess, you would probably have a lot of folks saying that they're doing everything that they can to raise as many alarms as they can.
I don't think it's enough. And I don't think it was enough when he was campaigning. I think that we coddled this idea of a man who has been a self-proclaimed pussy grabber for, and how 18 women have come forward, which, by the way, I think all plays into the Me Too movement. I think the Me Too movement had its power because this man was the president. I think during this time, instead of calling it what it was, which was total and crazy bullshit that this guy would actually be allowed to be the greatest leader of the greatest country
leader of the free world,
on the planet, the most powerful country on the planet. The fact that instead of news media going, this is just crazy, they said they reported it like it was normal, so it completely normalized the entire thing. We looked at it like, well, this is entertaining, this is getting us ratings.
You have panel after panel of people, certainly at MSNBC and CNN, who call the president a man baby, who say the president is not fit mentally to be president, it's not enough. It's not enough.
It's not enough.
What more could they do? They're basically members of the hashtag resistance.
A lot more. The fact that we were even having the conversation where this man might be allowed to appoint a second Supreme Court justice is crazy. The fact that he's going to happen. Yeah, he's being investigated. Federally investigated. I mean, he should not be allowed to appoint anybody.
Well,
and the fact he should not be allowed to appoint anybody.
In the era of the Clintons being federally investigated, if that were enough to stop you from being able to hold office, I don't think anybody would have had a...
For what?
For what? The Clintons were investigated for Whitewater. They were investigated for Bill Clinton's perjury. Hillary Clinton was investigated for... I had a top secret clearance at one point. If I had ever done what she did with her email server, I would have gone to prison. So they've been investigated for very serious matters.
So you think what the Clintons were investigated for is as potent and valuable as the fact that the President of the United States potentially conspired with Russia and continues to do so in some element?
There was that word potentially that you used. That's very important.
Right. Well, shouldn't we figure that out before he can appoint a lifetime position on the Supreme Court?
We are absolutely in the midst of figuring it out. It looks like the Mueller probe so far has no evidence of
collusion.
Right.
So until then, he should not be allowed to appoint.
That's effectively saying that until we can prove something that we haven't been able to prove so far, he's not really the president of the United States anymore.
No, it's completely different.
Why is that? You'd be taking away his constitutionally granted authority. To appoint a Supreme Court justice because of allegations.
You don't really mean this. And by the way, this is what I'm talking about normalizing the entire thing, is that you're actually. Well,
he is the president. I mean, that is a reality. He is, in fact, the president, so he's appointing a Supreme Court justice.
Yes, and I think much like Obama was stopped from appointing who he wanted, and I understand
that was a Senate majority issue.
I understand it was a majority issue. Yeah. But I think that we should do as a party everything we possibly can until this investigation is over to prevent him from appointing a Supreme Court, especially one that was handpicked by the Federalist Society, that already has political agenda and ideology that's not what the Supreme Court should be about. right? Regardless of, political whims and what a president is going to put on there, this guy was handpicked by the Federalist Society for not only the promise to roll back Roe v. Wade, his 2A stances, but also the fact that he's gone on record in 2009 saying that he doesn't believe a president should be investigated while he's a sitting president. I think that's awfully convenient.
We will have to see what processes are in place. Any predictions to the midterms?
I hope and pray that if we get out there in force, that we are going to be able to take back the House. I mean, California alone, we have 7 seats that are flippable. So where I'm normally traveling on election day all over the place to drive people to the polls, I'm actually able to stay in the state and help my state flip some seats, which is exciting.
Well, there we have it. You'll have more of my conversation with Alyssa Milano next week, where we talk more specifically about her role in the Me Too movement and why it's so very important in these times.
You guys had a good exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought
sure.
it was really interesting. So on the media piece, I don't 100% agree with what she's saying, but I do agree that the media was absolutely complicit in elevating and electing Donald Trump. And it wasn't because they weren't critical of him. It's because they gave him from the beginning, before he was a serious candidate, an inordinate amount of coverage. And I mean, you remember.
I was at CNN. I was an employee there when
the famous moment when Hillary Clinton is delivering, policy speech, and instead of playing that, they played his empty podium, because they're really about. They are really, and I've said this before. It's the cable news nets are not news; they are entertainment. And he was a great entertainer.
Well, they would disagree with that, as you know.
Sure.
They think that they are journalists.
The reality.
Right? I think you're right. I'm just saying they entirely
so
disagree with this. But
people loved the show.
It is true they were chasing ratings, and Trump is better TV.
And continue to.
Trump is better TV than Hillary, even according to people who love Hillary and hate Trump. That
Absolutely.
Also, though, they thought, Crystal, that by putting Trump on TV as much as they did, I think they were hurting him. I think that CNN believed that. I think that other networks believed it.
I think they just wanted the ratings. The ratings were good, so they preferred the podium to policy.
I think they made a miscalculation, and now they're living with the reality of it. But we'll see more from Alyssa Milano.
Well, and their ratings continue to soar.
She is spirited, by the way.
She's got a lot of views, and she's not afraid to tell you about them.
That's for sure.
Nice work on that.
Thank you very much. Next on Rising, in the last 24 hours, the White House lawyer Don McGahn announced his impending departure, and the president went to war with Google. The Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack, the man himself, he is here to help us explain all these things in The Debrief.
And later on, the interview comment that some people have been calling a dog whistle, some people have been calling it a bullhorn, and a fiery debate in the New York governor's race that seemed to set a new record for the amount of times a candidate used the word liar. We're going to get into all of that with Team Rising.